Hello friends, in this video we'll learn what are functions. So functions in C are very useful, are very important. So we'll take an example. If we want to construct an house, so we will never give it to one person. We say one person will not construct everything. He will not do the brick work. He himself will not do the carpentry work. He himself will not do the plumbing work. He himself will not do the painting work. So all the tasks are done by different people. So these are specialized tasks like doing masonry work using brick and cement is one person does this. Painting, a person who is well versed in painting will be a painter. So you will divide the task of building house to many people, give it to many people. So here also C programming, we are not going to write the entire program in the main functions. So main function is not used to write the entire program. So main function just calls the other functions. So we will create user defined functions. So the user will create, for example, if a programmer writes a program, he will not write all the logic in the main program. He creates separate functions for every logic, and he creates one function for each function, each task. So the main program just works like a contractor. It just calls the function. It does not execute all the logic. It just calls the functions and gives you the output. So now the main function acts like a boss, and all other function acts like workers. So we'll see what functions are exactly in this video. So to use a function, we have two requirements. One is the function definition and one is the function call. So you must define what a function is, how it looks, what's the return types, and you must call that function in a different. You can call a function from main function. You can also call a function from within other function. So you can call functions from whichever function you want. So we'll see one by one. So function definition looks like this. So it has a return type. So what the value the function returns, the function name, okay, and we have a parameter list. We can send values to a function. So we have few statements. You can have n number of statements here. I've just given statement 1, 2, and 3. So you can enter more than one statement. So in the last we have a return statement. So only if the type is not void, if the return type is void, we will not use a return statement. Whenever there is a return type void here, we will not use the return statement. So we'll see type 1 of the function. So here we have a function without return type and without parameters, without return type and parameters. We'll see the function definition first. So in this, we are defining a function with return type void. So we are not going to return any value. So we say void. We are not returning. The meaning of void is we are not returning any value from the function. And the function name is say hello. And we don't have any parameters. We don't have to send any values to call this function. So we just say print hello. We just say hello world in the printf statement. So you can see there is no return statement here in the last. This is the function definition. So how to call this function? You can call this function from any function, or you can call it from a main function. So when in the main function, you can see main function is also a function. It also has a return type of void, so it will not return any value. So usually the main function will be called by the operating system. So when we compile a program, it will be called by the operating system. So now we are calling a function inside the main function, that the say hello function. You can see this is a function call, and it ends with a semicolon. And we don't have a return type for say hello. You can see it's a void type. So we don't return a value. So we are not assigning it to any variable. We'll see what is assigning in the next. It's a function call. Okay, we're doing a function call here. This is the function definition what we saw, and we're calling that function. So this function only does hello world. It does not do anything. It just says hello world. So we'll see type 2 of function. second type of the function. In this, we are seeing the function with the return type and without parameters. So if we have a return type int, so this function should return an integer value. So no parameters are there, so we don't have to send any arguments when we call this function. So inside we have declared a variable int x. So x, we are taking the input value from the keyboard and then returning it to the calling function. So it will return whatever the value entered from the keyboard to the calling function. The calling function can be a main function or any other function. We will call it from a main function. So you can see the return statement is important here. Whenever you have an integer return type, you have to return an int here. It's x is an integer, so we'll return int. So when this is the function call. So in this, we declare a variable m, and this function is returning a value. So we have to assign that value to a variable. Whenever a function returns a value, you have to assign it to a other variable. You see, it's a function call, it returns int value, so assigning it to m. So we are assigning it to m, and then we can print the m value. So now taking the input is done by a different function. We are not using a scanf here. A function called get value is taking the value from the keyboard and it's giving to the m variable. Type 3 we will see. So in this, we'll function without return type and with parameters. So here we don't have a return type, but this function is looking for some values. So whenever a function calls this function, the calling function should send values to x and y. So these are parameters, function parameters. So we don't have a return statement because we are using void as a return type. So here I'm calling it from main function. We have int m and n declared in main function. We say enter two values to the user. User enters two value and we will send this value to the print value function. So we are not, the print value function does not return anything. So we are not assigning it to any variable. So but this function is expecting two values. Whenever we send m and n, if we send 5 for m and 6 for n, so the x will receive 5 and y will receive 6. So this way we can send values to a function. So we'll see the last type, in which function with return type and with parameters. This is the function definition. We have a return type of float and we have parameters, two parameters of type float. So we have to send two values to this function. This function returns some values. See, I have used a calculation inside the return function. So after the complete calculation, it will return a value, float value, depending on x and y. X and y is obtained from the calling function. So you see, we have created three variables of type float, m, n, and average. So we have used the average function here. So we'll say user entered two value. User enters two float values. Then we will provide the average function with two values. If user enters 5.5 and 6.5, so m will receive 5.5 and n will receive 6.5. And we will send to that function average m. So 5.5 and 6.5 we are sending. So x receives 5.5 and y receives 5.5. Sorry, 6.5. X receives 5.5 and y receives 6.5. So here 5.5 plus 6.5, we get 11. 12 as output. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So it will return 6.0, a float value as average. So that 6.0 will be taken by this. So thus that will be assigned to this average variable and we will print the average value. So we make a function call from here. We have to send arguments. Whenever you call a function, you should check the signature, whether the function is looking for a value, how many values it's looking for two values. So you have to send two values. So it's returning a value. So you have to assign it to a variable. So this way we have to see, you have to use the functions in our program. So main function will not see. I can call here input function, average function, output function. Only three functions I can call instead of declaring all these variables. So main will not do most of the logic. So here in this explanation, I have just given simple logic of taking input. So we can make very complicated programs in C, complicated logic. So you can use functions, you can separate all the code. So one more advantage of functions is you can use a same function two times. You don't have to write the code again and again. So you have to call the function again and again. You can call the function same time, n number of times. If you create a function called average of two values. Whenever you want average of two values, you just call this function from any function. It will do the task for you. If it's 100 lines of code, you don't have to write the code again and again. If it does a particular task, you create a function of with all that code. Whenever you want that function, you want that operations to be done, task done, you just call the function. You can call n number of times. This is the advantage of functions. So you don't have to write the code again and again in the main. If you want to calculate average 10 times, you don't have to write the logic in the main function for 10 times. You just create a function which calculates the average, and then you call it n number of times. So a function is one of the most powerful tools used in C programming or in any programming language. So type 1 example we'll see. So here we have created a function called sum. So this function will take a value from input from the user. We are not sending any arguments to this function. It's not returning any function. It just we will call this function sum. So it will take the value from the user. It says enter a number, and we'll take that value in m. Okay, here it should be m actually for I less than or equal to m. So there's a small mistake here. So it calculates the sum of. Okay, we have to change it to m to n here. So this will calculate the sum of n numbers the user enters. So in main function we just say void sum. You can see here main function is not doing anything. It's just calling the function. So the sum function taking care of taking the input and calculating sum of n numbers. Type 2 example we'll see. So in the type 2 example, average of 3 input numbers, we'll create a function which creates average of 3 numbers. So in this the return type is float. So we'll call this function. This function will say enter 3 numbers, take 3 values and returns the average. All we have to do is in the main function we have to call the function. We'll say float a is equal to average. So after that we can print the value of a. It will give the average of 3 numbers. So it's very simple. The main function will become very simpler as you create more functions. We see type 3. In this we have a return type void. We're not returning any value, but the function is taking 2 values from the calling function. So this is a program which this is a function which gives smallest of 2 numbers. So if the value of m is less than n, it says smallest of 2 numbers is m. If the value of m is greater than n, it says smallest of 2 numbers is n. So in the main function we take 2 values. We say enter 2 values, %d, ampersand x, ampersand. We'll take the input for x and y. We'll just send it to smallest function. So since it's not returning any values, we don't have to assign a value. We can just call smallest function. So it will display depending upon the user, the value entered by the user. So we'll see type 4 example. So type 4 examples is largest of 2 numbers. So this function calculates the largest of 2 numbers. So it will take 2 arguments and return 1 value which is the largest number. So it's a simple logic. If m is greater than n, it will assign m to the large and large will be returned. Else if m is less than n, n is assigned to the large and large is returned. So in main function we say int a, b and large. We say user enter 2 numbers and user will enter 2 values. We'll send it to the largest function. So we see whenever the user enters a as 1 for a and 2 for b. So 1 and 2 are sent to the largest function. So here m receives 1 and n receives 2 when user enters 1 for a and 2 for b. So then the largest function calculates the largest of 2 values and returns it, and we can catch it in a variable called large and print it. So here you can see this large function variable and this large variable are different. So these two are different variables. So whatever the variables m, n and large available in the function cannot be used in the main function. We'll see that when we do some programs. So function can return only, we have some rules for the functions. Function can return only one value. Function can contain local variables and they are not accessible in other functions. If you create a variable int large in one function, you cannot use it in a main function. Or if you use a variable int x in main function, you cannot use that variable in the other function. So they are local variables. Function call should match the function signature. That is, how many variables how many arguments it's taking, how many parameters are there, how many arguments should be sent, what is the return type. Everything should match when you call a function. One function can call other function. For example, if you're calling a function from main, you can call if you're calling a largest function from main, you can call smallest function from large function. You can call one function in the other function. Values in the local variables are lost after the completion of execution. See, once you initialize a value in a function, for example, in this function, if I say here somewhere large is equal to 10, so when this program executes, when you call the largest function, so it comes to this largest function. Once this function is completed, it comes back to the main function. The control comes back to main function, and the value inside the function, the variables in the function will be lost. For example, m, end, and n, and large. So these contain some value when we calculate, but once this function is complete, these values are lost, and it will be returned to the whatever the return value is. Only the return value comes back to the calling function. Friends, in this video we have learnt about functions. So we'll see some examples in the next upcoming video about functions. Thank you for watching this video.